Thank you all for joining us for the fifth annual Supply Chain Transparency Conference hosted by SourceMap. I'm very excited and proud to have you all here with us this morning or afternoon. My name is Marissa Brock. I am the Senior Director of Policy and Government Affairs at SourceMap. As I said, this is our fifth year hosting this virtual conference. Every year, we have brought together industry leaders and subject matter experts to speak to some of the most pressing issues facing the industry around supply chain due diligence. And this year has been a particularly interesting year in terms of some of the pressing policy issues and really, frankly, volatile policy issues around supply chain due diligence. We've had a very interesting year in terms of, frankly, a bit of whiplash with both EU and US policy. That's what we're going to talk about quite a bit today. So we're going to run through what agenda we have for this morning and some of the really exciting speakers that we'll be bringing you today. If you have any colleagues that were not able to join today's session, we are recording, so we will be able to share the recording at the conclusion of today's session, and you will be able to watch these sessions on YouTube after we have concluded the webinar. So please feel free to circulate this webinar with your colleagues. And if any want to join in progress, the Zoom link is open, so please feel free to share. So we're going to kick off the day in about 7 minutes with the EU battery passport and the future of consumer-facing traceability. We're really excited to start the day with this session because this has been a topic that has generated a lot of interest over the last several months. Many of you are aware that the EU battery passport and the EU battery regulation, I should say, was delayed to 2027. But this is still a regulation that generates a lot of interest, a lot of questions from the industry and from the market, because there's still a pretty substantial amount of data collection and data requirements that are required for this regulation. And industry that will be affected by the EU battery regulation and the subsequent battery passport, are really eager to start, laying the foundation for that due diligence. And frankly, both the battery passport and the digital product passport are sort of turning points in terms of consumer-facing traceability. So, we're starting the day talking about, how these are, turning points for consumer-facing traceability. So this is a really interesting topic in terms of how the EU is transforming consumer-facing traceability with these product passports. So that is the first thing that we have on the agenda. We will follow that with unpacking the proposed EU deforestation delay, what companies can do to ensure they don't get left behind. Obviously, this is sort of the hot topic. As all of you should be aware at this point, now 3 weeks ago, the EU Commission announced its intent to delay the EU deforestation regulation. Following that announcement, there obviously needs to be a legislative process to actually put forward that delay or enact that delay. All signs point to that delay actually moving forward, but we've already gone through this once. We're having deja vu from 2024 when EUDR was delayed the first time around, but the world is very different now in 2025 than it was in 2024. And so companies are approaching this delay a little bit differently than they did last year. And so we're going to talk through, what companies should be doing this time around as they await the official announcement of the delay, and when that official announcement goes into effect, what they should do to really take advantage of this additional 12 months. Because, as we saw in 2024, 12 months is not a tremendous amount of time, frankly. And so even with that additional 12 months, what should they be doing to make sure that they are fully prepared come December 2026? So that will be our second topic on the agenda. Following that session, we have a really interesting session on traceability for rule of origin tariffs, how supply chain mapping can help companies calculate tariff exposure and exemptions. So this is a topic that, again, we get a lot of questions about at SourceMap, not just from the companies that we work with, but from some of the partners that we work with, and just industry experts and leaders in the tax and tariff space. Rule of origin tariffs, particularly when we're talking about Section 232 tariffs, have obviously been a very big topic of conversation, particularly with this U.S. administration. So this will be quite an interesting topic to dig into this afternoon. So that will be our third topic on the agenda today. And then we will close out the day with a fireside chat, what closing the de minimis loophole means for U.S. forced labor enforcement. This frankly flew under the radar with everything else that's happening in the United States. But on August 29th, the U.S. officially closed the so-called de minimis loophole, which was the loophole that allowed goods valued under 800 US dollars to essentially circumvent full customs scrutiny. And so now those goods are subject to not only full customs scrutiny in terms of being subject to the U.S. forced labor ban, full tariff and tax scrutiny, but they are subject to sort of the full scrutiny of Customs and Border Protection. But this has really caused a lot of chaos, frankly, in terms of backups at customs, but also a significant increase in goods that are being detained by customs, because think about the amount of goods that are valued at under $800. These are direct to consumer goods. These are all of the sort of low value goods that are shipped to consumers every day. The majority of goods that were previously getting detained under, or all of the goods, I should say, that were previously getting detained under the U.S. forced labor ban were, these high value goods, car parts, solar panels, these very expensive goods that were valued at much, much, much higher than 800 US dollars. So this is actually a very large change in terms of how CBP will and FLETF will enforce the U.S. forced labor ban. And frankly, this is something that sort of, to some degree, flew under the radar in terms of CBP related news because of everything else that has been happening in the US. So this is what we'll close out the day with. And this is a packed agenda, but throughout the day, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. If you have any questions throughout the day, please do raise them in the Q&A function. You can pose questions anonymously, so please do send those, and we will, as throughout the sessions, if we have time towards the end of each panel, we will do Q&A towards the end of each session. So please feel free to raise questions to each of our panelists through the Q&A function at the end of each session.